Hello, and welcome to Beyond Common Business Secrets. This show is for service-based business owners, experts, authors, spiritual teachers, and coaches who are ready to step into their truth and get paid for it. I'm your host, Tracey Watts Cirino, and today we are diving deep into a question I have been obsessed with most of my life or my entire life. And that is, how do you say what you do? How do you say what you do? Like what you know, what you've lived, what you're uniquely gifted in, what you're uniquely qualified in, so that people actually buy from you, right? Like, how do we package this many layers of who you are and what you have to offer into something that is so easy for people to understand so that they will buy from you instantly? Like, how do we do all of that? So, I think early on in life, it started with me asking questions like, why are we here? And what's my purpose? Right? Like things like that. Then as I, got into the real world of working and commerce and business, that, that all kind of started going that way. So if you have ever created offers, service menus, high ticket coaching packages, or signature programs. If you've ever written a book, but you feel like your messaging is falling flat, you're in the right place, my friend, because this episode is especially for you. I have spent my entire life asking questions that most people just haven't considered. Asking like, what, first of myself, like, what is my purpose? What is our, for the collective, like, what is our real purpose here on earth? Like, why are we all here? What is it that we're supposed to do while we're here? And then I often ask, how can I simplify this work and make it meaningful for the greatest good of the whole, like of all, right? For the whole collective, for the world. And that is the lens that I teach through. That's like I ponder things, I contemplate, and I teach through the lens of, okay, it's first like, how does this work for me? How does this work for you? Which would be like those in your community. And then how does it work for like all of us, the whole global world? And I teach it through this lens. That's just a truth seeker. And for those of you that are really into human design, that is my 63.6. That lens is the truth seeker lens. This is literally like, even though, my parents would tell you I was a bit annoying as a child because they're like, how is she know to ask these questions? They're like so out there. But this has been apparent in my whole entire life. So here's the thing that I've realized though over the years. So being a truth seeker, it isn't about knowing all the answers. It's not about knowing all the answers. It's about asking the right questions and asking questions that other people maybe haven't considered, or they had a fear of how to ask that. How would it land? So to me, I think it's about having the courage to follow the answers that feel true to you, right? Like I will ask a question that is deep and meaningful. And sometimes people will be like, oh, they're like, could be put off by it. And I'm asking that question through the lens of what's true for you in this moment. Not like it's never to be answered in the lens of what you think I'd want to hear, right? So when you ask yourself these questions, or when you have a coach and mentor like myself, that is courageous enough to ask you these hard truths, ask you these questions that can be harder to answer, know that it's through love and support and the lens of we are on this mission together of finding your truth, right? Like there's nothing that I know to be true that you don't already know is true for yourself. The way that I ask these questions is to like bring it out of you, to let it unfold layer by layer and reveal your truth now because we are always growing and evolving. I remember I was scared to death to write my very first book because I was like, well, what if I learn something new and that belief changes tomorrow? Because I can look back on my life of from the time I was a little girl to now, and there's so many segments and pockets of where I believed something with every fiber of my being. It was like my truth. I like was so passionate. I had conviction about it. And maybe you've had that too about something. And then you look back and you're like, oh, that's so embarrassing. Or that's so funny that I really believe that. Because along the way, you learned a new truth that was more true for you at that time. So that's the thing, like that's living. That's like our like limitless potential, living out loud and really following this path of what's true for, for us. And so that's just so funny that I look back and um my son's so cute because he goes, "Mom, I'm now that you have six international best-selling books, like what if you were like what if you did stay in that fear?" I'm like, yeah, that'd be so crazy because I can't imagine not at least trying and experimenting with it. So that's what this is about. It's that invitation. So, oh, over the years, I've realized that you just have to have that courage to follow, to follow the answers that are true for you now. And if you don't have someone in your life that is bold enough or, audacious enough, um, even unapologetic enough, like myself, to ask you these profound questions, stay tuned to check out even more of the episodes of Beyond Common Business Secrets because we often do that here, right here on the show. So feel free to go through and listen to past episodes and ask yourself some of those questions, right? Or get a you can get an accountability partner. You can hire a coach, of course. There are so many things, but make sure you have people in your life and in your circle that care more about you finding your truth than that you won't like them, right? Like sometimes we can't ask this of our friends or of our family because those relationships are based on like us liking each other and loving each other and that is a bit different than like a coach and mentor relationship. So this is so important, especially when we look at it through the lens of like having the courage to follow the answers that are true for you right now. This is exactly what happens when you start building your like business marketing message in a way that actually converts. It's like you're no longer guessing. You're no longer softening your message so that it's like, oh, I want people to like me, so it's for everyone. What happens is you're really speaking your truth with clean and clear conviction. And then your audience, your real audience, the buyers, the people that are like, here's my credit card, I need what you have to offer. The buyers, those people, those are your people. That's your audience. They feel it and they stand up and say, oh my goodness, I need to work with you. That like, let's go, right? I remember even when I first discovered human design, and human design is a tool that I use with many of my clients. We use this in conjunction with the other tools I use when I coach, mentor, and build people's marketing plans. it's another layer, right? It's another layer. It's not the end all be all, it's another layer. But when I first you started being introduced to human design, I was like, I didn't trust it. I didn't trust it at all. I, of course, questioned everything. I poked tons of holes in it. I thought, maybe this just isn't for me. It was like, whatever. How could it be based on the ancient I Ching and all these different layers of stuff and this body graph? Like, what in the holy and astrology and this and that, like all the things. I remember questioning everything and going, okay. So then it was the doubt, the suspicion. And that's exactly what makes life work for me. Like when people are telling me all the things about their business, I will put it through sort of this lens and filter of the doubt of things because of the way that people out in the world, the way humanity receives things. Like I'll apply that layer of doubt. And that is exactly what makes like it work, right? Because that is just like a natural gift, right? Because I think I understand and have been such a great teacher and advocate for human design because I didn't accept it blindly. Like, I don't accept much blindly. I test it, I observe it, I ask questions, I step away, I like, like I see how this plays out. It's exactly how I build someone's marketing message. That's how we built like voice to cash. It's how I go back and like edit every book, right? Whether it's a book I've written for myself or I'm helping a client publish, market, and edit her book. It's just it's through this lens of refinement that it all comes. That is the deeper meaning of why it's important to ask questions. So, what I've realized so much over the years, like I've realized that much like messaging, you cannot follow someone else's formula. You have to find what's true for you. So that's the piece of like, we could listen till we're blue in the face to every marketing guru telling you like you must do this, you must do this, you must do this. Especially like if you're on TikTok, like every single person's telling you you must do it this way, you have to do it. And you might try it and go, oh, that feels icky. It doesn't work for me. Like that's okay. You tested it, you tried it. The thing is that you must start filtering this information that we're given through a lens of like, is this true for me? Is this my truth? Because you're going to have things that don't feel right. And that's the whole point. That's what makes all of us unique and different, right? So you can't just blindly follow someone else's formula without asking or taking the time to find out, is this true for me? Is this true for me right now? Right? Is this really true for you? So, and then here's the kicker. Like most experts, coaches, service-based business owners, they're still trying to create messaging, maybe from an old version of themselves, like that is shaped by conditioning. Because one of the things that we'll often hear in marketing and messaging is, oh, you need to make all of your marketing for who you were 10 years ago, because that's what led you to create this great offer, which may be true. However, it's going to feel inauthentic and fake and not real because you have completely evolved. You are no longer that version of yourself. Back then, you were conditioned to believe something totally different. So that's why your messaging would fall flat and be like, well, but this is, even though you're looking at it through this lens of this is really what happened. I was believing this fully. I did this and then it didn't work for me. And then this sent me on a spiral and I went on this path and it took me down this road. And that's how I discovered this. And then this is why I created this, this program, this book, this offer. It's like only half truth. So even if these offers that the big gurus have created, even if they're amazing and they've been able to sell like high ticket coaching packages, it's like it's not true right now. And so it can fall flat and it will be like, I don't understand. I did what every guru said. Why didn't it work? Oh my goodness. These are the calls I get. This is like how most people hire me for marketing. And then it becomes something so much deeper, right? I become a mentor. They become part of my coaching program because they want to have their business and their life align in a way that actually feels good. It's like we want the business to serve our life and we want to love our life. Like I can tell you with all my heart, my absolute truth is I love what I do. I love working with amazing clients. Like it's such a gift, it's such a blessing. And I have been coaching and mentoring people for over 20 years and I still love it. I get absolutely excited. I'm like, oh my goodness, let's dig in. We're going to do this. We're going to create this amazing thing. And I have had dozens of high level coaches and the big guru mentors say, "Oh, you cannot act like that. You cannot be so excited. You've been doing this so long. You sound like you're like just getting started, like you're like this rookie." Well, good. I am excited and I am curious about what you have to offer. And I want to help you put this into a marketing message and offering that feels good outside in the world, but feels so great in your body that you're excited and proud of yourself. Like, I love that about myself. And it keeps things fresh. Like, I really am that excited. And if that makes me look new and inexperienced, too bad. I have been doing this for so long. It's like so natural. It's as natural as breathing to me. So that's like the kicker in this, right? It's like you have to realize that through all of this, if it feels like your messaging is falling flat, if you're noticing like other big guru experts and it's like, it's making you feel ick, like it's falling flat for you, you need to recognize that your truth is what converts. So speaking truth first is never going to lead you astray. Like you have to trust and know that you will always be evolving and growing. Like that's what personal growth and development is all about, right? But truth is what will convert every time. So I want you to think about this. Like, think about if you've built a signature offer, you know it works, you've helped clients, you've delivered results, and yet your messaging isn't converting. Is it that you're softening it? You're over explaining it? You're saying what you think people want to hear? That's where most high ticket offers stall, not because the offer isn't valuable, not because your expertise isn't deep or well needed. Like people need what you have to offer and people want to pay you. What happens, it's why it can fall flat is because your messaging isn't aligned with your truth, right? Do you believe it? That is like one of the biggest, most profound questions I will always ask my clients. It's like, do you believe it? Because you must believe it before you send yourself on a tangent. Like I have worked with clients that have spent hundreds of thousands of dollars going all over the place to get everything just right for their business. And they've launched multiple times, they've done this, they've done all the things. And they are like, it's such a good business, it's such a good offer, it's such a great opportunity. Like, but it's crickets, no one's getting it. Do you believe it? Do you believe it? And they're like, what? It's like you need to first believe it before you go any further. Like one of the things I wish I knew dozens of years ago, multiple businesses ago, is that go out and speak your truth to people. And whether that's in person or on the internet, it doesn't matter. Just go out and speak your truth to people before you even build a website about it. Because sometimes people think they need to have the website just right before you just go speak your truth to the people. And I was like, oh, I didn't get that. And I'm telling you, it has refined so many times. I feel like our website is in this constant state of refinement because the more we're out there speaking and coaching and mentoring people, like It's always changing and evolving. So you're never going to get it just right, but you want to get it where it feels like you, it feels like in your heart, in your body, like this is my truth. This is who I am. This is what I have to offer. And I'm excited to work with you. Like it needs to feel like that because when it feels like that, people are like, oh yeah, here's my credit card. Sign me up. I cannot wait to work with you. So that's the thing that when your messaging isn't aligned with your truth, that is always going to fall flat. And that's exactly what we fix inside my voice to cash intensive. This is a done for you service. So inside voice to cash, like we literally, I named it so simple voice because it's literally about taking your voice, the essence of who you are, what you do, what you've created. It's like I take everything out of your head, like, ooh, I pull all these strings, right? Your expertise, your knowledge, your wisdom, your humor, the essence, the core of who you are. And I turn it into messaging that converts. So we take the essence of your voice and turn it into words and messaging that converts. So you can sell your offers in a way that feels good, in a way that first you believe, once you believe, everybody believes, right? This is like even your high ticket coaching packages sell without forcing it, without scripts that are overdone and feel fake and all the things, right? Without any of that, right? Like, I know there's been so many things that people are like, oh, you have to do it this way, you have to do it that way. Like, I laugh 1,000 times when people are like, you have to do it consistent. You have to be there every day. I'm a manifester. My version of consistency is creating when I am in this high vibe creator, high urge. And then I like put it out there at all different times. There is no way that the minute I had this high level urge and I'm in like my creator energy, that I could put it all out there. It'd be like spraying the world with a fire hose. That just would never. So sometimes even great advice for 99% of the world is not going to be true for you. So that is why working inside something like voice to cash, that intensive, that does it for you. It's like I created this so that my expert clients could get back to just being their brilliant selves because they were wasting years and so much energy and money on finding the words. Like it was like an endless thing of more meditation, more journal entries morning after morning, and they just still felt like it wasn't landing. And how I love journaling. I write every day. I love meditating. But if after years and years of doing this, it's still not working for you, like have an expert do it for you, like myself, so that you can go back to just being your brilliant self. So I love creating and turning your messaging into, like when we take your experiences, your knowledge, your vision, how you see the world, what makes you sparkle, and we turn this into the messaging that it just converts without trying. It's so natural. It's like, duh, of course. Of course it did. Like amazing. So this is so that you can sell your offers, even things that are high ticket without forcing it, without like overdone scripts, without you feeling fake. Because if you feel fake, then people are like put off by that. They can feel it and they're never going to say, here's my credit card. So I make this so simple inside Voice to Cash so that you can do it while you're grabbing coffee and someone says, hey, what do you do? Like I can turn around and say, oh, I help experts translate their marketing into messaging that makes people actually say, here's my credit card. I can't wait to work with you. Like I can say that so quickly, right? I translate your expertise into messaging, words that make people want to buy and work with you. Like you want it to be that clean and that clear, right? It's like I help experts say what they do so that people lean in and say, oh, I need that. Or, oh my God, my girlfriend's been searching for you. Can I have your number? Because literally she's going to give you her credit card today. I'm so glad I ran into you. Like that's what you want to be hearing, right? So once your messaging is aligned with your truth, everything changes. Like your business is fun. Like business was supposed to be fun. Your audience resonates, your offers convert, your business flows. It it feels good, right? It feels good. Like this is the whole point of why most people went into business. Like you didn't want to be in a career that told you what time you had to be somewhere, that you couldn't have the day off to go catch your kids' football game, that you couldn't go out of town this weekend to take your daughter to a dance competition, right? You started a business for freedom. And this is what this gives you back, right? So if you're at the point where you know you have something powerful to offer and you need to get it in the hands of more people, you you have something powerful to say, but it's not translating into clients, sales, or the momentum you need to keep going and be excited about your business. That is exactly what we do inside of my Voice to Cash Intensive Done For You service. This is exactly why we created it. So I take everything in your head, everything you've lived, everything you know is there, and I turn it into your messaging so that it converts. It's not forced, it's not scripted, it's true. And it's like that smiling, loving truth, right? Whether you're selling your high ticket coaching packages, whether you are selling high end services, signature programs, or any type of service offers, this is a done for you service that gets you into action. Like this pain point that's causing you so much anxiety and stress, I completely take this away, do this for you, so you get to go back to just shining your brilliance everywhere. So you can enroll now in Voice to Cash and start turning your voice into revenue immediately. Um, I will link the offer like in the show notes, it'll be there. And then if you're somebody new that's just starting out that doesn't have the funds to invest yet, then I also have like a one sheet where you can apply the beginning of my, it's like sort of my voice to cash methodology. I call it my money messaging methodology. You can apply that to your messaging out of the gate so that you're starting out with the fundamentals of these. And then as you grow, of course, and have higher level offers, of course, we would love to write those offers for you. So you can enroll in Voice to Cash and start turning your revenue in or turning your turning those conversations, those just casual conversations that you have day to day with acquaintances, with friends, even with family that might know someone that needs what you have to offer. When you start using Voice to Cash, you get to turn your voice into revenue immediately, right? So before you go, make sure you share this episode with your business bestie and leave us a 5-star review wherever you tune in and listen to your podcast. This helps other business owners, experts, authors, and coaches find our show and helps more people step into their truth. I am so excited to help welcome you into Voice to Cash. Enroll today. I'll see you on the next one.